So, good morning, everyone. My name is Katia, and I'm the Executive Director of Seniors Action Quebec. So, I'm actually really excited about this webinar today. It's something we haven't really done before, so it's a first for us. So, today's webinar is going to be on the portrait of adult literacy in Quebec's English-speaking senior population. And we have Laura Thompson, who's the acting executive director of Literacy Quebec, who's going to be doing the presentation. So just in case, the kind of the breakdown for today's where Laura's going to jump straight into the presentation, and then at the end we're going to do a little Q&A. So the idea is that you can put your questions in the chat, and then I will feed the questions to Laura. And then we'll just go with the flow and see what happens. So Laura, over to you.
All right, thanks, Katia. And hi, everyone. Thanks for coming today. As I want to thank Katia for arranging this, and I also want to thank Brendan for being our tech wizard. So thank you both. So I'm Laura Thompson, and I'm the acting executive director at Literacy Quebec. So just a quick visual description of me. I'm female. I have dark brown hair. I have big black headphones on, a gray sweater with some pink and red stripes. And then my background looks kind of like a gray clapboard house, and it has the Literacy Quebec logo in the top corner. So a little more about myself as well. I have 10 years of experience working in literacy, and a lifetime of experience just being exposed to literacy like the rest of you. I've worked with adults on improving their basic education skills, and also ones that were working towards their high school diploma. I've worked in a community library with people of all ages, from little kids up to seniors who had all sorts of different literacy needs, whether they were looking for certain books or computer skills. And I also taught basic digital literacy, learning how to use a computer class as well. So about Literacy Quebec. So Brendan, you can go to the next slide. So we're an umbrella organization that supports 15 local English-speaking literacy organizations across the province with professional development opportunities, resources, and advocacy. And as you can see on the screen, our mission is to connect and represent these organizations to empower people, impact lives, and build a stronger society. Our vision is that we want to live in a Quebec where everyone has the literacy skills they need to live a fully engaged life. And also our core values are that we see literacy as a right. We see literacy as a lifelong process. Everyone deserves to have access to literacy services. And we think that ongoing professional development for literacy providers is essential, and volunteerism and community action matters. So we're located in Montreal, but we represent literacy councils from across the province. All right, Brendan, the next slide. So what is literacy? So on the screen here, you can see UNESCO's definition, which is that literacy is the ability to identify, understand, interpret, create, communicate, compute, and use printed and written materials associated with varying contexts. Literacy involves a continuum of learning to enable an individual to achieve their goals, to develop their knowledge and potential, and to participate fully in a wider society. So with literacy, we often think about the reading and writing part, but there are a lot of other skills that people need to be able to navigate the world, right? So being able to understand the instructions on cooking your oatmeal in the morning, understanding how to take your medication, whether you're supposed to take 2 a day, but do you take 1 with breakfast, or are you supposed to take it with food, without food, with water, without food, 1 at breakfast, 1 at dinner, that kind of stuff. Calculating a budget, understanding a transit map if you're trying to get from one place in a city to another, using a computer to do researching or online shopping or reading the news. So phrases like digital literacy, financial literacy, health literacy, physical literacy are all becoming more common as we realize that there is so much more to literacy than just the reading and writing part. And these are all skills that you need to be able to navigate the world around you. Another note about literacy is that we see it as being on a spectrum. So it's not you have literacy or you don't have literacy. You could have high literacy skills in one area, but maybe lower literacy skills in another area. So there's no one who has zero literacy. You might have low literacy skills or higher literacy skills. And generally, if you have lower literacy skills in one area, you tend to be able to compensate by having higher literacy skills in a different area, like being able to remember your shopping list if you're unable to write it down clearly. So now that we have a sense of what literacy is, I just wanted to go over a couple of stats on the next slide. So you can see here Quebec's population. So you see the pie chart on the left. So the green part is English speakers. So there are 1,253,580 people who identify as English speakers in Quebec. And of those, there are 193,685 people that are over the age of 65 who identify as English speakers. So that's a pretty good number. And a pretty good number. And now I'm going to go into the concerns and the challenges of literacy and being a senior in Quebec. The next slide, please. So for this, because with the numbers, you can't really put a face to numbers. So I talked to one of the adult learners at one of our member organizations. So at Reclaim, and I talked to Ramsey. He might be here today. I can't actually see who's in the audience. So if you're there, Ramsey, thanks for watching. And also Eric, who is the program coordinator, I believe. Did I write that? Program manager, sorry. Program manager at Reclaim. And he works with Ramsey and other adult learners basically every day on all sorts of things. Mostly his expertise is digital. So together we came up with this list of kind of main concerns and challenges that are facing seniors in Quebec and related to literacy. So the four things here are isolation and importance of being mentally active, navigating the healthcare system, digital skills and access, and the need for good allies. So I will go into each of these individually, but I also kind of wanted to check on your thoughts as well to see if you have experiences in these or if there are other things that you would add to the list. So, please put them in the chat and then we can talk about them at the end. I'm curious if you find things that are surprising or maybe not surprising. All right, so next slide. So the first one I'm going to talk about is isolation and the importance of being mentally active. So this quote comes from Ramsey. And it says, "Since I retired, I decided to go back to try and learn more about reading. When I started to read and write, I found out that my brain was always stimulated with ideas. It's always moving around and I'm not sitting still." So he also went on to say that he thinks of an idea or problem, and then he thinks of a solution, and then he thinks of another solution, and he's always using his brain in a very active way. And that's really important because I love that idea of being mentally stimulated. And as we're familiar with the idea is that if you're not using your brain or those skills, that they can deteriorate over time. So it's important to keep being mentally active. And there is evidence that lifelong learning and continuing to learn and grow can be beneficial to not only to your health, but also to your social lives, which is nice too. So I also found an interesting fact that age was an important factor in affecting participation rates in adult learning. So the rate of participation in adult learning actually tends to go down as people get older. But as that participation rate went down, their proficiency levels in things like reading and numeracy and tech skills also went down. So again, it's another motivating factor for trying to keep those skills sharp. And it is also known that people who had higher rates of literacy to start with are more likely to continue to participate in lifelong learning opportunities. So if that's the case, how can we kind of break that cycle? Because it's important for everyone to have access to these different kinds of activities. And then finally, one more quick note on formal and informal learning opportunities. Both are beneficial and they're both totally legitimate ways to learn, but don't feel like you need to be sitting in a classroom to be learning. Because that's considered formal education, which is awesome and is great. But you can also find other ways of learning that are called informal ways. So things like one-on-one tutoring or one-off workshops. And these are just as beneficial, if not more beneficial, because they help you focus on your own interests and your own curiosities, and they can build the things that you're interested in. And the learner can also dictate what they want to know or what would be useful for them and how they want to learn it. So, as Ramsey said, it's really important to be mentally active and nourish that curiosity. So I had originally linked this section to isolation, but then as I was working through the rest of the presentation, I felt like isolation kind of fit into all the different areas as well. So it's not just being mentally active that can prevent isolation, but it certainly helps because then you're able to meet in a social group. And that's a great way to share and learn together. So that for the next slide is navigating the healthcare system. So Ramsey said, it's important for the healthcare system to realize that people have reading problems and you have to know what to look for. Then you have to try and accommodate those people with that problem. So as I'm sure many of you know, the healthcare system is paper crazy, which is another direct quote. So for someone who may have trouble reading or trouble seeing, the paperwork can be a huge barrier. And often it's in French, which might not be a language that you're 100% comfortable in. And this is also assuming that you don't have to travel for services because there are services available in your area, which is not always the case. So here I wanted to mention the Yamaska Literacy Council, who's another one of our member organizations. They're in the Eastern Townships, and they actually created a health literacy booklet to kind of help clear things up. So originally it was created for adults with low literacy in mind, but they found after it was produced that it was quickly requested by seniors because it was in large print. They had clear visuals. The information could be stored all in one place. So it's a book, and then you can add your own information, about your doctor and the phone numbers and the important addresses that you need. So that's a really cool resource. And you can either reach out to me, my contact information will be at the end, or you could reach out to Yamaska Literacy Council if you're interested in getting a copy of that. There's also a place in the book that talks about users' rights, which, as we know, are really important because we have rights to healthcare, and it's important to understand what that means and what that entails. So another great organization is called Educalois, and they're based in Montreal, but again, can access them from anywhere in Quebec. They provide legal services, or sorry, legal information. Have to be clear, legal information, not advice, in clear and plain language, so that we can actually understand what our rights are in various situations. But they do have a really great resource that they call the healthcare guide. So if you want after, I can put that in the chat for us as well. On the other side of things, so you as patients, it's important for you to stand up for your rights and make it clear if you don't understand something, that you have the right to understand what kind of care you're getting. But you also have to know, maybe feel it out and know when the time is to be loud and when it's better to be a little bit quieter. But for healthcare workers, it's really important for them to be patient and to listen And it's important for you to request the assistance that you need. So Ramsey talked about knowing when to speak up for yourself, and he found it took time, but now his regular healthcare providers know him and they understand his needs better, and they're better able to accommodate him, which is great. And I hope that's something that all of you can do as well. Sorry, losing my voice already. All right, so the next slide is digital skills and access. And this quote from Ramsey: "When I first started using computers, I was scared. But I realized in time it was a great help for my self-improvement. I want to try ideas, but also early on, I wouldn't have done any of that. Now I can do it myself, and there are tools that help me." So that is awesome that, he was willing to try it and learn. And now there are a lot more things that he can do independently because he's found these cool tools. So one of the things that Eric, the program manager at Reclaim, had brought up was the importance of being able to be independent. And that's something that the literacy councils do encourage. And of course, you want to be as independent for as long as you can be, right? So there are so many great tools through computers and through smartphones and other digital things that can be really helpful, like speech to text. So you can talk and then it will write it out for you, or text to speech, where you take a picture of it and it will read it to you. Google Lens is another one like that, where you can hold up your phone in front of a sign and it will read what it says back to you. But the other thing he said that was important is to have someone who can support you in that learning. So, for example, during COVID, at the beginning of the pandemic, Eric was so impressed that how quickly his classes were able to jump online and learn, and willing to learn, and just try things and adapt. So internet wasn't an issue there, but maybe if you're in other areas, more remote areas, the internet access could be an issue, and that could also limit the kind of learning that you can do, and it can seem like a big challenge. So if you're able to get over those humps, digital skills can be really useful, and especially for people with lower literacy skills, because they provide that opportunity to be more independent. And again, if you're able to get online, it's another way to break isolation. So if mobility is a challenge, or well, basically, yeah, mobility is a challenge, or you're just not able to get out of your house, you're comfortable doing that, being able to connect with people and doing classes online is a really great way to still connect with people without even seeing them face to face. And as I'm sure you know, there are online classes to stimulate your brain, stimulate your body if you're exercising, and pique your interest in all sorts of things. So it really opens up that opportunity. And also having someone on your side who is able to help you figure these things out and can help get you started is a huge benefit. So that leads me to my last point, which is the need for good allies. Next slide. So this quote: "Through time, I learned the most important thing for people with a reading disability is to first get people you know and that you trust, to understand your problem and to work with you to help through that." Another thing I found out, especially working in construction, is that a person who has a reading problem is usually more adaptable than other people. And I can see a problem in a different light, and that's okay. And that's absolutely okay, because it's very cool to see things different ways. So one thing to think about is how you can understand how to recognize the signs that someone may have lower literacy skills and how you're able to support them. So for that, our literacy councils are there for you. They can provide support you need. They can set you up with classes, with one-on-one tutors to help with whatever goal you need. Sometimes they can provide you with equipment too, because you don't want to go out and buy a really expensive phone and then you don't know how to use it and then it becomes, a paperweight. You don't need to have a very expensive paperweight. You can go out and get a rock. Works the same way, right? So the literacy councils are a great place to start. And then if you are wondering how to better support people with lower literacy in your own communities, we at LQ have an online learning portal called LQ Academy that has some really great foundational courses. So the second one called Lit 102 actually goes into how you can recognize the signs that someone may have low literacy and what kinds of things you can do to support them. Like going over the forms with them more slowly instead of saying, just do the best you can, just read it. And listening to what they have to say and finding ways to adapt. Because taking that little bit of extra time to make sure they understand can make a really big difference. And then if you're looking at that course as well, you can also look at our other foundational courses. So there's one on what literacy is, and then there's also one on using plain language. So that leads me to the last slide that I have. And these are things that you can do. So I've already talked about LQ Academy. We also have a health assessment module, and then we also just released a family literacy module. So if you're interested in those, you can find those on our website as well. We also have a podcast. So if you're interested in, learning more about different people's experiences with literacy, that's a great place to start. We often have authors and other interesting people, and they often tell good stories. So I highly recommend that. And then the final thing is that we have a toll-free helpline that you can call if you have any literacy issues or literacy problems that you need to have resolved. Even something like you don't have a printer and you need something printed in hard copy. We can print it and then we can send it to you. We can also put you in touch with the Literacy Council in your area if you want to learn more things, or if you know someone who that might be useful for, you can also put them in touch with them. Also, if you're interested in volunteering, and I know that all our literacy organizations do want volunteers and do need volunteers, you can also get in touch with them directly, or you can use the helpline to try and get in touch with them. And we'll be happy to direct you to the right place. So that kind of sums up my presentation. It was a little faster than I expected. Talked faster. And then on the last slide, we have our contact information. So you'll see our website, our phone number, our general email address, which is info@literacyquebec.org. And then you see my personal work email address, Laura Thompson @literacyquebec.org. So that is all that I have to say for now, but I am happy to take any questions or listen to any discussion, especially about your own concerns and challenges as seniors in Quebec. So thank you.
So thank you, Laura. Before I jump into questions, I failed as my duties as executive director as at the beginning of the webinar. I forgot to thank our funder. So thank you to the Department of Canadian Heritage for allowing us to produce these webinars. So Laura, there's no questions in the chat as of yet, but sorry, I got distracted by the chat. But I was jotting down some questions, so hopefully I can, understand my own scribbles and I can ask you some questions. So my first question to you is, with regards to literacy skills, and I don't know if you have the answers to these questions, but is there a difference between, say, the Greater Montreal area versus I don't want to say the regions, but outside of Montreal, is Is it higher? Is it lower? Is it even?
That's a really good question, and I don't have the answer off the top of my head.
Hmm.
Um, I would think in the regions, because there is a little bit, less access to
Hmm.
services, and special services, that it is probably a little bit lower.
Hmm. Okay. And off the top of your head, do you know if the rates are higher between men and women? And is it kind of younger seniors or older seniors? Is there changes? Is there differences in the numbers there?
Generally, women are more likely to ask for help,
Okay.
go to classes and um, request services. That doesn't necessarily mean that their literacy skills tend to be lower or higher. I'm not sure about that. I just know that it
Mhm.
tends to skew towards women who do go to the centers.
Okay. And are they on the lower scale of, so like I guess the lower scale for seniors is 50 versus, or 55 versus 65 and up. Are they more older seniors or younger?
Generally, from my own experience, I think the ones that come to the learners who do come to our literacy councils tend to be older, but that could also have to do with retirement age
Okay.
and having the time to actually go to
Okay.
classes and to do self-improvement, where maybe the ones that are closer to 50 are still working and don't have that time during the
The
day.
time, yeah. Um, so in the presentation, you mentioned how um if when the rate of participation goes down, the literacy skills go down. And
Hmm.
immediately my brain went into, well, why would the participation levels go down? Is it just, do you know why people just stop participating or?
Well, over time, that stat also has to do with people of all ages, so not
Mhm.
just seniors getting older and not not participating, but for younger people, when they start having other family commitments, like families or their job, that's when classes tend to kind of take a back burner.
Okay, so it's
And
not, okay, it wasn't just specifically for seniors, it was just in general. Okay,
that was
perfect.
a general quote or a general
Okay.
stat.
And this is a bit of a tricky question, but if seniors are isolated and that isolation, or just people in general, but specifically seniors are isolated and that affects their literacy skills, then how do you go and find those seniors to get them to participate so you can improve their literacy skills?
Like,
It's
that
a
is
big
also
one. It's a
it's
big
also a
one.
really
Sorry,
good
Laura.
question. No, that's okay. Well, that's why we're doing presentations like this, and
Hmm.
working with Seniors Action Quebec, and just trying to get the word out there, because the helpline can be, you don't have to reach out to a senior specifically, but if maybe someone else hears about the helpline, they'll know of someone that might be feeling isolated.
Hmm.
So you could reach out on their behalf as well. But that's something that, where I think a lot of community organizations struggle with. How do you get the people you want to help if they don't know you exist? So
Right.
yeah, so
And
finding different ways to reach out.
okay, and within that, you mentioned that the signs that someone has lower literacy skills. So what if can you maybe elaborate on what those signs are so that if someone suspects that someone has lower literacy skills, but they're doubting their own kind of belief, and then they perhaps want to reach out, but they're not sure if those are
Right.
right signs. Do you
Mhm.
know what those signs could be?
So common signs are excuses, making excuses for not reading a paper if you hand it to them, like, oh, I forgot my glasses, or just shoving it in their bag and saying, oh, I'll read it later. Those are relatively common. Sometimes being frustrated if they do receive paper. So
Hmm.
it's always, and it's also always good to check anyway, because it's not just about the literacy skills. It could be maybe they need better glasses, or they visually they can't actually read the paper. So
Mhm.
having those verbal conversations to understand to understand, make sure they understand, and using a talk back method, which is that I explain this thing to you. Now you tell me what you heard and explain it back to me to make sure that you're both on the same page is another good way to tell, or a good way to you should do it anyway. It doesn't take a lot of extra time.
Okay. Um, so a question came in, which I thought was interesting,
Sure.
is how many people with literacy challenges have dyslexia, for example?
I don't know that number off the top of my head because I think
Okay.
there are still a lot of people who've not been diagnosed, especially older people. But dyslexia is definitely one of many reasons that people may have reading challenges.
Okay. Um, Perfect. And another question came in, which I jotted down, so the time has come. Do you know the difference, and it doesn't have to be a number, but the level of English speaking Quebecers versus French speaking Quebecers and literacy levels? Is there a higher, is it about the same, or are there the numbers a bit higher for English speaking seniors, or is it even?
I think, again, I'd have to go back to double check and look at pie charts and things. I think it's relatively close. I think English speaking Quebecers tend to have slightly higher literacy levels. They also have slightly higher education levels, but I think it's slight. And I'd have to go
Okay.
back and confirm that. Yeah.
Okay. Um, And then another question came in. Can failing eyesight or hearing impact your literacy levels?
I think in the idea of if you're not being mentally stimulated, that it can. So if you're not able to see or you're not able to read, you'll need to find other ways to stimulate your brain and to practice, because literacy is very much a if you don't use it, you lose it principle. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like any other muscle, you need to exercise it, you need to practice.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're not practicing every day, it is something that can definitely decrease.
Okay. Um, and we lost Eric because I wanted to ask him a question specifically, but he's disappeared. So that's unfortunate. My timing was off there. Because the next question I wanted to ask is, do you find in this post-COVID world, in the work that you do you find there's more awareness now of the challenges with literacy and specifically digital literacy with seniors than say before the pandemic?
Definitely, I think definitely among seniors, um, because before COVID, there was no need to be stuck in your house alone, right?
Mhm.
You could go to the library or you could go to the classes, and you could be social that way. But with COVID, when everyone was stuck at home, you needed to find new ways to connect. So having Zoom calls and Zoom webinars is a great tool for that as well. And then that's also why we created the helpline, because people used to go to the library to get certain resources or to ask for information, and then suddenly they couldn't. So to have another place you could call and say, hey, is this place open? Or how do I find information on this? And you have someone who can help you. Um, was was the
Also,
kind of the motivation behind it.
also the helpline came about because of the pandemic.
Yes, because there were so many closures. The general public wasn't able to access their typical services,
Okay.
right? So like libraries or literacy councils or other community organizations that would usually provide that kind of support.
Okay. And do you see a benefit to having the helpline? Like is it less intimidating for people to maybe call a helpline versus going to a library? Is it kind of, does it create some breathing space, if you will?
I think now, because libraries are open and all those services are open, that it's nice to have another option, but
Mm,
it's not necessarily the option that people would pick, right? If you go to the library and you know your librarian, and you're really comfortable with them and you see them all the time,
Hmm.
you probably wouldn't have an issue asking a question.
Right.
But we do get calls primarily now for no like reference referrals to our other literacy councils. Um, but during the pandemic, we got a lot of calls when we had to have the QR code COVID passports. So a lot of people didn't have printers.
Yeah.
And at the beginning of that, we were able to log into their account if they gave us permission and gave us the information, and then we were able to print it and send it to them. And that's something that they wouldn't have been able to access otherwise.
Okay. Yeah, I remember that period. Yeah, it was a bit of a challenge for everyone.
Mm.
I had to help my parents with the QR codes because they'd never used that before. Another question I have is specifically with seniors and literacy, if there's cognitive decline in seniors' health. Do you know what the impact is on literacy skills?
I would assume that literacy skills also go down, but I don't have a stat
You
for
don't have a
that. Like
stat
I
for
haven't
that?
seen a study, no.
Okay. And then the other question I had is at the beginning of the presentation, you were talking about the how people can compensate their literacy their I can't speak their literacy skills. So for
Right.
example, they could their reading skills might be a bit lower, but then they have really, really good memories to kind of compensate. Can you maybe talk a bit more about that, kind of what you've seen or what you've heard on
Um,
people?
yeah. That one I think is my favorite example of thinking of if you're not able to write a list, then you have to be able to memorize the list when you go
Hmm.
to the grocery store. Um, Other examples would be, as Ramsey said, seeing problems in different ways.
Hmm.
So if you're looking at maybe instead of focusing on the words, if you're looking at more of the shape of something, if you're looking at a map, you might have a better sense of understanding how to navigate from one place to another based
Hmm.
on just looking at the shapes of roads as opposed to the actual street names. Um,
The things we do to get by, I guess that's not the right way of saying it, but I haven't had enough coffee, sorry. Yeah, it's how we learn how to adapt.
yeah,
Um,
exactly. People are really adaptable. So,
yeah.
people are really skilled and talented in all sorts of different ways. So even if reading and writing is not their strongest suit, they still have lots of other great skills.
And do you see kind of a change in sort of the challenges with literacy? Is it more reading or is it more digital or is it kind of even or is it changing, if you will, or adapting with the times?
I think it probably is adapting with the times because I think most of our organizations now offer, like originally they had all been created as one-to-one tutoring kind of places for to work specifically on reading and writing. But over
Hmm.
time, they've all grown and expanded. And I think they all offer digital literacy classes now. So I think that is probably the gateway to kind of finding out about a literacy council now more is, I want help. I want computer help. I want to be able to have a Zoom call with my grandson in, Vancouver. And
Hmm.
that's something that I never you didn't have to worry about as much or think about as much in past years. But computers are becoming so prominent in everything, like even from booking appointments, even if
Hmm.
like not even just medical appointments, but if you want to get your hair cut, you have to go online. So any like that kind of stuff or ordering groceries, again, that was a pandemic thing. But these are all the things that we used computers for during the pandemic that there is a huge gap in the population who's like, oh, I haven't done this before. This is a new
Yeah.
experience that I should learn how to do it.
And the people who give the one-on-one sessions, are they primarily volunteers in the literary councils and organizations?
For the most part, each literacy council has their own staff and their own their own way of working.
Mm-hmm.
So primarily they were all volunteers. Now we definitely have paid staff that do some of the classes.
Mm-hmm.
But I think primarily the one-to-one tutors are still volunteers.
And do you know what the if it because with community organizations post pandemic, a lot of these organizations lost their volunteer force, if you will, which were
Yep,
primarily seniors.
exactly.
So, right, it's the catch 22. So, is is that challenge still there for literacy councils and community organizations? Like, are their volunteer numbers coming back up? And is it kind of a mixture now? Is it predominantly seniors or is it younger people as well?
They're still looking for volunteers. Like I don't, that tends to be a common thread among
Yeah.
most of the organizations is that they still need volunteers. And they need them more than ever because a lot of people decided during the pandemic that it just didn't work and they didn't come back after.
Hmm.
Um, so I think now it might be skewing more towards to younger people, but again, younger people don't necessarily have the time to commit that a certain number of hours a week or times during the day.
Hmm.
Whereas the seniors can be very really helpful because a lot of you are not working or not working full time, that your schedules can be a little more flexible. And you also have a wealth of knowledge that the younger people don't have. So if you're able to volunteer, I know there are a lot of literacy councils that would really like to have volunteers.
Okay, and
And
if
that can
someone,
be in person or it could be online, because there are also learners that are still not necessarily super comfortable with coming into a space. So
okay,
they would still rather be online.
okay. And do you have a link for that in case someone's interested in volunteering?
So the best thing to do would be to call the helpline and then we can refer you to the closest literacy council.
Okay, great. Um, a question just came in if and I don't I hope you can answer this, but does a person's socioeconomic level or financial resources their literacy impact their literacy in accessing computers and tablets and cell phones? So does having that those tech things, I can't think of the word, help their literacy skills or does it
It
not?
can. I would say that the biggest thing is if that you're financially stressed and you're focused on the financial aspect of it, you might not be able to focus on your literacy skills. So
Mm-hmm.
there are studies that show that financial and socioeconomic levels do impact literacy skills. And that could be because of equipment, but it could also
Mm-hmm.
be for a number of other reasons, like maybe not having the enough food every day, or
Right,
not having access to other kinds of services and having that additional stress.
right. Um, I may go a little bit rogue here. Sorry, Brendan, but there was an interesting comment in the chat that came in from Reclaim, and I don't know if Eric wants to turn his mic on so I can ask him this question because my inner nerd is kind of curious right now, and I wanted to see if he was okay if I could ask him that question and maybe Eric could elaborate.
Hi, I can talk on here. We're here with the whole group here. We're here with 7 people.
Hi, group. Hi, Reclaim.
Hi.
So Eric, you is it okay if I read the comment?
Well, that's what, yeah, this is me paraphrasing what the group was thinking is important. So I
Mm-hmm.
realize it's more of a declarative sentence than but if Laura wanted to comment, because it is a, and type in if you want to change how I'm saying this, but that most people, like one of the issues for like, well, seniors and literacy and stuff is that the information where you can get help isn't in the normal channels. And then every time they are, so there's an awareness that needs to be cultivated, is that people do have reading problems and people aren't looking out for that. And to make it doubly frustrating for some of these folks is that they go to their caseworker and say, well, I have trouble reading and writing, and then now they're being sent to a French course. And so that's the and then we need to, so there are the services, but they're just not they're not known about, and that's one of the things that, you know, a lot of literacy councils will relate to, is like, how do you get the word out? But there's this extra complication. So talking about literacy in Quebec in English, you know, this is something that we can't ignore.
So Laura, I don't like, I was going to throw it to the two of you in case you wanted to piggyback off of that, because I find that really, so full transparency, I worked 10 years in adult education. So I'm holding back a little bit here. I'm trying, but Laura, is there anything you wanted to add to that, or?
Well, no, Eric, I think that is a really good point. And that's something, again, for literacy councils to make them better known. So then, because literacy councils are often working with those other organizations that can provide services in English. So it's really important to get the word out about these organizations that do exist.
Yeah, because we find time and time and again, we can do all the outreach we want, like we can, but then there'll be like we're kind of one rogue social worker who's like, oh, I didn't know you guys existed. And then we get like three new learners while they're on that job or whatever, right? And so it's an interesting, it's a thing, but it's not really like something that we can even have a solution for, but it's something that was one of the main things that this group of literacy learners here, many of them seniors, we're talking about as one of the main frustrations.
And I think by having everyone on the call who is on the call today, make sure, you know, you're telling your buddies about the organizations that you know about. And then those organizations know about other organizations. So try to do your best to build the network the best you can. And, you know, we're trying to create awareness so that there aren't those social workers who aren't aware of the literacy councils as well.
So I have so many questions, but I'm gonna, so I think we said the webinar was tentatively going to end at 11:30, but that was just to give wiggle room. But so the idea was always that we were going to give an hour to this, because this is the first time we've done a webinar on this topic, and I think there's a lot of food for thought here. Maybe we can do another one at another time. Who knows? We'll see what happens. The future's unwritten. But thank you for this, Laura. This was very, very interesting, and thank you, Eric, for just going with the flow when I went rogue there. But yeah, there's a lot to think about. So what we're gonna do right now is just in case, because we've got this, I think this is webinar 17 out of 21. So what I'm going to do is, in case anyone wants to know what we're going to be doing in the future, I'm just going to put the link here to our newsletter, so you can get all the updates on what Seniors Action Quebec is doing. And then I'm also going to put in the link to our events page, so you can read up on our upcoming webinars. And we're going to be putting the information up and sending out the information for our March webinar shortly. Then Brendan, do you want to put the
It's already there, the link to the survey.
Oh yeah, it's right there. So we would really appreciate it if you could take the time to fill out the Survey Monkey with the feedback for this webinar. Just a little caveat, these 4 webinars that we're doing as part of our deliverable activities for Canadian Heritage, they're a bit more informal, if you will. It's just to see if this kind of system or way we're doing webinars works, just keeping them a bit more as a chat instead of a formal presentation and Q&A. So if you can let us know how we're doing, that would be greatly appreciated. And our next webinar is on, what day is it? February 20th. And the topic is going to be understanding and navigating the journey of caring for a person living with dementia. So that will be Tuesday, February the 20th from 10 to noon. And I thank you all for taking an hour out of your day on a Tuesday morning to come and listen to this webinar. The recording will be sent in about a week or so. We're going to upload it on YouTube and our website, and then I'll send the link out to everyone. And I think we're good. Thank you for this, Laura. And thank you again, Reclaim. Thank you, Brendan. And thank you, everyone, for joining us.
And thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.